I'm Kathy Speck with the Ames Historical Society, and I'd like to welcome you to the third lecture in our 8th annual lecture series. And we are delighted to have you here, and we are especially delighted that it is not snowing and raining out tonight. Yay! Now, this is the third lecture, and there is one more. If you haven't picked up the flyer listing all of the lectures, be sure to grab one on your way out so you know when that last lecture is, the last Tuesday in April, 7 o'clock, right here at City Auditorium, marking the centennial of the Lincoln Highway as it goes through Ames. And Jeff Benson will be here to tell you some wonderful stories about the Lincoln Highway. And we hope that you had a chance to browse a little bit out in the lobby. In addition to our little gift shop, there are a number of artifacts from our collection from various mayors. And there are, let me see, Dennis gave me the list here, about 7 mayors, stuff from 7 mayors. Tommy Thompson, Lee Fallinger, our first woman mayor, Paul Goodland, Stuart Smith, Joe Lawler, Don Newbro, and Ted Tedesco. So be sure to take a look at that little display out there on the table. As always, we thank those of you who dropped a donation into the jar on the way in. That helps us cover the cost of this wonderful facility that we enjoy. Comfortable seats and the slanted floor, it really helps everyone. And we also thank our members. We could not do it without our loyal membership that supports us every year to do the things that we need to do. There are hundreds of local history stories as interesting as the ones that you will hear tonight, but putting them together takes time and resources. And memberships in the Ames Historical Society provide those resources on an ongoing basis. If you are not a member, we hope that you will consider becoming one to ensure the preservation of our collective past. Now, and the other thing is, I hope that you signed up for the door prize drawing on your way in. And right at the end of the program, Shannon will put her hand into the fishbowl and draw out some winners. Our presenter, Shannon Bardole, grew up nearby, just over in Ogden. And her mother loves history, so the family visited many historical sites in Iowa when she was a kid. She swears every single one, but maybe not. She got a degree in family services from the University of Northern Iowa in 2002, but her interest in history really spiked when she interned at Living History Farms as a historical interpreter during the summer of 2001. She went on to work there from 2002 to 2008. After beginning a new career path at United Way of Story County, she wanted to become more involved in local history and sought out volunteer opportunities with Ames Historical Society. Shannon has taken on many projects for us, not the least of which is an extensive permanent exhibit in City Hall featuring our mayors. And she dug into that research that she compiled to put that exhibit together to create the talk that she's going to give this evening. So please welcome Shannon Bardole.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about what I have learned. I fear that Kathy has given me a little more credit than I do. Let me tell you a little bit about this Ames Mayor's Project, as is seen here in City Hall. This project began in the spring of 2005 when some citizens approached City Council about creating a memorial tribute to one of our mayors. And Council really thought it would be more appropriate to honor all of the mayors. So Mayor at the time, Ted Tedesco, who you will hear from later this evening, we're so glad you could join us. He began this project, and it was really Councilman Riyad Nahaney that continued the project with the assistance, of course, of the Ames Historical Society. There were a lot of volunteers who put a lot of time into this project, so I know some of you are here. If you maybe want to put a hand up in the air if I say your name. The volunteers that worked on this project were Peggy Bear, Dennis Wendell, Marty Rasmussen, Gloria Betcher, Doug Biggs, Conrad Lawler, Mike Schuster, Kathy Speck, and myself. And the staff that worked on this project was Margaret Vance and Alan Sponheimer. So my experience with this project came after the World War II web pages were finished. And if you haven't been to the Historical Society website and seen the World War II pages, it's really very fascinating. There's a page for every World War II veteran from Story County. So I walked through the door saying, I would like to volunteer, and they said, we would like to have you work on the computer. So once I finished up that project, I said, okay, what's next? And there was a few little projects, and finally they said, this one, we think we want you to finish this one up. And so this is where I'm getting more credit. I just finished it. All the hard work was done well before I started. Everybody else had already done a lot of the research. I just compiled it and stuck it into some frames. So each one of our 41 mayors prior to our current mayor, Ann Campbell, has an 11 by 17 frame with a photo with their mayoral term and some interesting facts. And this is all at the base of the main stairwell here in City Hall, and it was installed this fall. So this is an example of what you would see. So this is how big those frames are. You can actually walk right up to them and see a lot of the information that's on there. Now, if you don't want to take the time to look through every single one of those, you can actually go to the Historical Society website, because we have pretty much all of this information on the website as well, including all those photos. There is one mayor that you are not going to find. I thought that it might be fun to do just a little bit of trivia this evening, and I have to tell you that a lot of this trivia comes from some of the things that I thought was interesting about our mayors. So a little bit of audience participation here. While C.E. Turner was mayor, he was our second mayor from 1871 to 1872. Which of the following things happened? I would like to see some hands in the air. Do you believe that chickens were no longer allowed to run at large? I can see you. Anyone? There's a few hands. Okay. The dog pound was established. Nobody thinks that at all? Okay. A city ordinance stated that firecrackers were not allowed in the city. Few of you. Okay. The city established a downtown district for licensed moving picture houses and theaters. Ooh, lots more hands. Believe it or not, the correct answers are two of them. One, chickens were no longer allowed to run at large. And a city ordinance stated that firecrackers were not allowed in the city. However, the other two things happened while other mayors were in term, of course. The dog pound was established during our 19th mayor's term. And the licensed moving picture houses was during our 24th mayor. Some of the things that I found interesting were just the lengths of the terms of our mayors. And first I want to tell you about our first mayor, William West. He was elected to a one-year term in 1870. The population of Ames was 656. He operated the first hotel in Ames, the West House, which is located where the Octagon building is today. He was known to be a childhood playmate of Ulysses S. Grant. He was on the school board when Central School was built. But he resigned at a special election held on March 22nd, which is less than 3 months after being elected on January 8th. Our fifth mayor, W.D. Lucas, actually filled the remainder of his term until C.E. Turner was elected during the next regular election the following year. And as I've shared that story, that our first mayor only served about 3 months of his term, people said, well, why? Why did he resign? I wish I had the answer. I could never find it. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I never could find that one. So our shortest mayoral term went to our first mayor, William West. Now our longest term was held by Frank Hinman Schneider from 1924 to 1934, and he was only beat out in years as mayor by Parley Sheldon, who is also known as our perennial mayor. And I'll explain in just a moment. Oh, I should also say, I don't have time to talk about every single mayor. So if there's any, if you have any interest in any of our other mayors, certainly ask. I'll do my best to answer your questions at the end. But we're just not going to have time to cover them all this evening. We had 3 mayors that served separate terms. Certainly, we have a number of mayors who served multiple terms in a row, but these are the 3 gentlemen who served separate terms. So Henry Wilson, Here on the left was our 10th and 16th mayor. William L. Allen was our 28th and 32nd mayor, but Harley Sheldon, the reason he was known as the perennial mayor was because he served 4 separate terms, and if you do the quick math there, it was for a total of 18 years over a 32-year period. One thing that was interesting was to see the number of mayors that served in the Civil War. Harley Sheldon, let's see, now I'm not going to get it to work right. That guy right there was one of them, but you can see a number of other were also mayors. One of the more notable ones would be Wallace Greeley. I'm sure many of you have heard of Captain Greeley. Harley Sheldon, prior to his first term, was a farmer. He also served as a postmaster of Ames and was a banker, a very well-known banker in the community. He promoted the installation of the city's first sewer system and the installation of gas streetlights on Main Street. And one thing that was real interesting, I came to the lecture last month, which was about the history of the DOT. And so as Leighton Christensen was talking about the DOT coming to Iowa, I thought, yeah, I know who did that. That was Harley Sheldon. He laid the groundwork to bring headquarters of the Iowa Highway Commission to Ames. During one of his terms as mayor, he welcomed Theodore Roosevelt to the city. This was in 1910, and so Theodore Roosevelt at the time was the most recent past president of the United States. But he came through on his whistle-stop tour, and this is a photo of him during that tour. Also, while Harley Sheldon was in office, women were first allowed to vote in a school election. It was during his final term as mayor that he partnered with H.L. Munn to build the Hotel Sheldon Munn. So if you wondered where that name Sheldon came from, it's Harley Sheldon, this guy here. He also laid the cornerstone for the new Ames Municipal Building, which is now the Youth and Shelter Services Building. And one thing that you might find is that a number of our mayors, or at least a few of them, have streets named after him, and it was in 1915 that construction began on Sheldon Avenue. Okay, are you ready for a little more trivia? Let's see a few more hands in the air this time. While Thomas Thompson was mayor from 1899 to 1902, which of the following things happened? City Council voted to spend $100 to develop the park known today as Banshell Park. Anyone believe that happened? A few of you. Lifted a month-long ban on dances that had been designed to prevent the spread of influenza. A few of you. A new ordinance mandated that bicycles have lights and that bicyclists riding on the sidewalks must dismount when meeting or passing a footman on the sidewalk. A few more of you. The correct answer is C. City Council voted to spend $100 to develop what is now known as Banshell Park during our 11th mayor's term. And that month-long ban on dances that had been designed to prevent the spread of influenza was in February of 1920, while E.H. Graves was mayor. Certainly, our mayors served our community in many more ways other than just being the mayor. You might have noticed the title of this was something about movers and shakers in our community. Let me tell you about these movers and shakers in our community. More than 40% of our mayors were the owner, proprietor, or founder of their business. And W.D. Lucas, whose name you might remember because he was the mayor that filled out William West's term, was credited with establishing the first bank in Story County. So other popular professions held by our mayors were bankers, real estate, grocer or merchandise, and lawyer or attorney. So think about the bankers and the real estate agents and the attorneys that you know, and think about who it is that you might encourage to become a mayor someday. Now, one of our more unique professions that a mayor held was that of a priest. And I have to tell you, I'm a little nervous about talking about him because I'm pretty sure a lot of you knew him. So you'll have to correct me later if I speak a little out of turn and say something that's not quite right. He was the priest at St. John's by the campus Episcopal Parish. And one thing that I thought was really interesting as I was doing this research was to look at things that I already knew something about and find out how they started. So working at United Way of Story County, I'm very well connected with the human services community, and so I'm very well associated with ASSET. Let me give you the very brief description of ASSET. The brief description is that ASSET is comprised of the City of Ames, Story County, Iowa State's government of the student body, and United Way of Story County to recommend the allocation of funds to human service agencies. That is the very condensed version of this. And when I first started at United Way, and Frankie Olson explained this to me, it probably took her about a year to explain it to me before I really got it. So Frankie, thank you for taking the time to do that. So it's kind of a complicated thing, but understand that this is a very simple way for each one of these human service agencies to put in one grant application to 4 funding sources. This is a very unique process in Story County, and it was Paul Goodland who started this process. So that is a picture of the ASSET website up there in the corner, and they have already been busily deciding on funding decisions for the next fiscal year. It was also during his time as mayor, though, that the former Ames High School was renovated to become the new City Hall, of course, where we are right now, and of course the photo there on the bottom. I'm sure many of you will also remember that the downtown train traffic was reduced because of the negotiation and the abandonment of the Chicago Northwestern Railroad tracks across Lincoln Way, also during his term. Another way that our mayor served our community was through politics and other kinds of service. There were actually 14 of our mayors who served on city council prior to their term as mayor. Parley Sheldon, Thomas Thompson, and both of our female mayors, Lee Fellinger and Ann Campbell, just to name a few. There were 8 mayors who served on the Board of Education, including William West, who was on the very first school board, W.D. Lucas, Parley Sheldon, have you heard that name a few times yet tonight? Wallace Greeley was on the Board of Education. And again, one of those things that I like to know how it started, I'm a member of the junior chamber, and it was William Allen, that 2-time mayor that I mentioned earlier, was very instrumental in establishing the Ames Junior Chamber of Commerce. So very much the movers and shakers in the community. I'm going to just put up photos of a few of these mayors, and you'll have to know that we didn't find photos of all of them. We did most of them, but not quite all of them. So as I'm going to chat a little bit about each of these mayors, I'm just going to put up their photo just so you can see who I'm talking about. So while C.E. Turner, our second mayor, was in office, City Council began having a meeting room and an order of business. While William Clark, our 6th mayor, was in term, the City Council secured an agreement with the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad, allowing Ames to connect to the railroad water supply in case there was a fire. Merrill Jones oversaw a very controversial increase in commercial assessments that led to construction of the first City Hall in 1886. E.H. Graves created a city business administration by hiring a purchasing agent for the City Hall and one for the light and water plant. Thomas Lester Rice adopted the city manager form of government. When Frank Hinman Schleider was mayor, park and city planning commissions were established. A little more recently, while Larry Curtis was mayor, city departments were moved into the current City Hall, and the public art effort was created. And even a little more recently, when Ted Tedesco was mayor, he created an ex officio member to the Ames City Council and a representative from the government of the student body at Iowa State, and was also the first mayor to give the annual State of the City message and to hold regular office hours. Trivia number 3. Which mayor has a city park named after him in appreciation to his services to the university and city? And this is not a multiple choice question. Somebody's just going to need to holler this one out.
Stuart Smith.
Stuart Smith, of course. One of the things that I thought was interesting was to see how many mayors were related to each other. And this Tilden family was kind of an interesting family. There were 3 Tildens that were mayors. George was the father. Lucian and Galen were his sons. So George Tilden was our 9th mayor from 1880 to 1881. He owned the general merchandise store Tilden Brothers and Company. While he was mayor, the first long-distance phone lines were installed. The first brick school building was opened. Central served all grades. As I said, he was father to Lucian and Galen, who went on to be mayors. And of course, not only was he a mover and shaker in the community, so was his wife. His wife was the first female member of the school board and later served as its president. So Lucian, there on your left, partnered with his brother Galen in Tilden Brothers and Company, and he was very well known for his civic-mindedness. Let me tell you just a few of the things that he did. He served on city council, the hospital board, the library board, the school board. He was Knight Templar of the Masonic Order and charter member of the Ames Rotary Club. His brother Galen, our 22nd mayor, was the first native of Ames to become mayor. And while he was in office, the Ames Intelligencer office, the Ames Intelligencer, which you would now know as the Tribune, that office installed the first wireless telegraph station in the state of Iowa. Now the other mayoral triangle that we see is that of the Smith family. Marcellus K. Smith, here on the bottom left corner, was our 17th mayor, and his father was Irenaeus Leader Smith in the top left corner. Well, Marcellus Smith was married to Laura West, and Laura West was daughter of William West, our first mayor. All right, next trivia question. While William Allen was mayor, mind you, he was one of the 2-term mayors and was also the one who was instrumental in starting the JCs. While he was mayor, which of the following things happened? The Transcontinental Highway was run through Ames. Okay, a few hands. The Grand Avenue underpass was completed. Oh, lots more hands, okay. Trolley rails were removed from Main Street and donated to a scrap metal drive to support the war. Or parking meters were installed on Main Street. Well, 2 of those were correct answers. The Transcontinental Highway was run through Ames well before William Allen was mayor. That was actually during Carly Sheldon's 4th term. And the trolley rails, I have to tell you that was a trick question because that happened while Hollis Bates Manning was mayor, and he was mayor in between the 2 times that William Allen was mayor. But the other 2 answers are correct. So we have William Allen to thank for the parking meters on Main Street. So I want to share a few more just kind of general interesting stories with you. And I think that Wallace Greeley, as I said before, is probably a mayor that many of us have heard of. You've at least heard the name Greeley before. He was indeed a captain in the Civil War. And the Greeleys, unfortunately, had lost 2 of their children in infancy. And his wife, Mary, passed away in 1914. And it became his desire then to see a hospital in Ames. And he announced a plan to build that hospital at 12th and Douglas on July 29th, 1915. And that hospital was dedicated on September 24th, just a little over a year later, in 1916. And of course, the hospital was in memory of his wife. And he gave that hospital to Ames as the city hospital. And there you will see Mary Greeley Memorial Hospital, as it was built in 1916. But did you also know that he donated the land to the city that the Ames Public Library sits on? He also was a mover and shaker. He co-founded the Union Bank in Ames, which was the first corporate bank in the city. And it later was merged with Parley Sheldon's Story County Bank to become the Union Story Trust and Savings Bank in 1932. And as a mover and shaker, he went on to serve 3 terms in the Iowa legislature. I had a special request for information on this mayor, George Alman Underwood. And I'm sorry to tell you that I do not have a lot of information about him, but I did find a really interesting fact. As Kathy said, I worked at Living History Farms in my past life, and I mostly worked on the 1900 farm. And in the year 1900, we were the only farm modern enough to have a telephone, and we loved that we could have that telephone there. So any information I found about the telephone I thought was really pretty interesting. And it was while George Underwood was had his term as mayor that the first battery-operated telephone was installed between the Ames drugstore and Dr. Beverly's office. And I suppose if you're going to install a phone line between the drugstore and the doctor's office, it was probably a good one to do. So, during Parley Sheldon's second term as mayor, I mentioned that he promoted the installation of Ames's first sewer system. However, not all the details of that sewer system were fully worked out by the time that Henry Wilson became mayor. And Henry Wilson was the editor of the Ames Intelligencer, again, known now as the Tribune. And, well, there was this newsworthy fistfight that he was involved with, and it was instigated by a councilman, Thomas Thompson, who later became a mayor. And this happened in front of the Union National Bank, which you may recall would be Wallace Greeley's bank. And this fistfight was over the cleaning up of the open sewer on Kellogg, south of the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad tracks. Now, I know that's very hard to see, so let me just read it to you. This comes from the Ames Times, not the Intelligencer, where he was editor of. Came from the Ames Times, Thursday, September 27, 1894. Monday evening, Councilman Thomas Thompson and Mayor Wilson met in front of the National Bank and entered into a conversation about the malarial ditch. Wilson asked Thompson if he thought he, Wilson, was to blame for the delay in this ditch matter, whereupon Thompson said he did. Wilson at once called him a liar, and Thompson let a left-hander fall on the dignified mayor's chin. It was no quicker begun than ended. The Times expected an interview with the mayor, but he has not been seen since the trouble. It was an affair of which both were, as now, no doubt heartily ashamed, as they should be. It sounds bad from a moral standpoint to have things of this kind occur and appear in the daily papers, as it did in the Capitol, casting a reflection upon the whole city government. Boys, you should curb your tempers. Our first female mayor of Ames was Lee Fellinger. She was our 38th mayor from 1976 to 1979. She was photographed with 9 other female mayors during the National League of Cities convention and featured on the cover of the Family Weekly magazine, which was a Sunday supplement to nationally syndicated newspapers throughout the nation. And that is her, right by her name there. And we certainly can't talk about Ames without talking about the university, being such an integral part of our community. So a little bit of interesting information about Iowa State. Both of the Tolman brothers were graduates. Parley Sheldon supported the Ames and College Railway's efforts to lay tracks from downtown to the Iowa Agricultural College, and oversaw the city's annexation of the college in 1893. This annexation raised the population of Ames to greater than 2,000. E.H. Graves was born on the Iowa State College farm. Thomas Lester Rice was a member of the first Iowa State College football team, according to his obituary. Although I looked really hard for a roster of this football team. Never did I think I would be sitting at the Historical Society searching for information about the history of the Iowa State football team. But there I was, a week ago, looking for this. And I came really close. but I never could quite find that roster from the 1892 football team. And unfortunately, the bomb, Iowa State's yearbook, didn't start being published until 1894, 2 years later, so we couldn't even use that as a reference for that photo. And Frank Payne, our 29th mayor, won a contest that named VISHA in 1922. VISHA stands for, anybody help me out, does anybody know? Vet Med, Engineering, Industrial Science, Home Economics, and Agriculture. Oh, good job. His prize was a ticket to all future VISHA celebrations. The parade theme of that first event was History of Iowa State as it is today, and the parade marshals were the deans of the 5 divisions. And as you can see from the bottom photo there, the dairy department won the prize for the most attractive float entered into the parade. I'm very pleased to have one of our city mayors with us here today. Another interesting piece of information, we have 3 living mayors of the city of Ames. One of our mayors is doing her job right now. She's in a city council meeting. And one of our past mayors, Larry Curtis, I think has not made it back from spring break yet. So I'm very pleased to have Ted Tedesco here with us this evening. Ted?
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much for all the work you've done on this project. I was asked to speak for a little bit about some of the things that might have happened when I was mayor. Maybe I helped instigate them. Maybe I don't want to be known for instigating them. One thing I noticed, though, I wish I would have gotten as much recognition when I was mayor as Fred does when he's never been mayor. Well, as Shannon mentioned, first of all, I did run against an incumbent mayor, Larry Curtis, and Larry and I are good friends. But the night that the results came in, I was at City Hall, and some of my campaign workers were there. My wife was at home getting ready to hold a party one way or the other. But the results were announced, and a lady came up and hugged me, and the photographer from the Tribune took a picture. Well, the next day I got a call. What's your wife's first name? I told him, Johnny, who's here, still with me. And he said, well, I got that picture of your wife giving you a hug. I said, whoa, wait a minute. That wasn't my wife. It had happened to be a lady who's here this evening, Neela Benson, who was one of our campaign workers. So I was afraid maybe I was getting started on the wrong track. Well, I did think it was time that the mayor make themselves more available to the community and to communicate more with the community. So during my tenure as 8 years as mayor, and I did serve previously 4 years on the council and 5 years on planning and zoning, that it was time to get out with the people. And so one of the things I thought about was the annual State of the City message. And it was a time when I liked to talk about the good things that were going on in our community, and yet make aware of the issues that were going to be coming up. And during my first term, everything went very well. It was during my second term, and I believe it was in my second State of the City speech, that I made the comment that I thought it was time that we considered the possibility of having a new mall out by the interstate. I want to tell you, talk about movers and shakers. I got them all going. also was mayor that appointed the first youth committee for the city of Ames. I thought it was important that we communicate with our youth because they were going to be our future leaders, and that somehow they may have become isolated. And this committee actually consisted of the junior high kids and senior high kids. Along with that, I also proposed to the council that we have an ex officio position on the council as a member appointed by the president of the government of the student body of Iowa State to be present and participate in our meetings and discussions. They didn't have the right to vote, and they still don't today. But because the university makes up such an important part of our community, and as you saw under Father Paul Goodland, that they were involved in the ASSET program, which is a program that is not carried on anywhere in this country like it is in this community. So I think that hopefully that position may mature in the future to where that representative does in fact get to vote on the city council. That would require a charter change. Certainly, a couple of the more happier things. I happened to co-chair the committee with Jackie Manette that actually got the bond issue passed to buy this building and turn it into a community center at City Hall. But one of the other things that I'm probably most proud of, I was probably one who kind of instigated and got it started, but Ada Hayden Heritage Park, which is thank you, which is really a bright spot in our community. It provides all types of recreation, promotes good health, getting out for clean air, a secondary water resource which we've been drawing on this last year and have in some years past where we had to pay for the water. But hopefully, my last day as mayor, I sent an email to the council and to the city manager that we should keep our eyes open for the gravel pit that's at the southeast corner of the city for a future park someday. And we are doing paths trying to connect those two areas together. We could be the city between two lakes instead of two rivers and a river and a creek, and one of them is a skunk. So, I would have to tell you that I was most fortunate as mayor. I had a very, very supportive city council. And I saw Daryl Beatty come in tonight. Daryl, stand up. You were on the council. You're over here. He can still stand up. He's not always on. I don't know if Sharon Worth is here. She comes. I didn't see anybody else actually come in, but they were very supportive. Also thanked Riyadh Mahaney for continuing after I was mayor to promote this project about the mayors. We had a lot of people that came to City Hall and asked about mayors and the history. Was there any archives? And really, essentially, there wasn't. And so with the help of Assistant City Manager Bob Kindred, we did pass some financing to work with the Historical Society to get this project completed. I always ended my press conferences with a thought for the day. And I would just like to say one thing. In our society today, and I know that Mayor Curtis would say this, and Mayor Campbell would say this, we have lost a lot of the civility between peoples. We've become disconnected. You know, it's very easy to criticize and be critical. It is most difficult and very hard to be constructive and part of the solution. Let's all pledge to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. We're glad you could be with us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
And with that, I would like to open it up to questions. Would you be open to questions?
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions? I fear I've left a little too much time for questions. I'm a little nervous about this. Yes?
Shannon, I was wondering why 1870? Did you come across anything in your research, and why
Why did Ames think they needed a mayor in 1870?
I know the answer to that.
Kathy knows. Here, can we give Kathy that microphone? Thanks, Kathy. Thanks for bailing me out. See, this is why you're not invited.
Ames was established by the railroad in the late December 1864, and the railroad's engineer laid out a plat for the city. But the city government was slow to start. They actually were not incorporated and required to start a city government until 1870. So it took them about 5 years to really get organized and to set up the framework for a local government. So in 1870, Ames was incorporated and initiated its first city government. So that is why Mr. West didn't get going until 1870.
Thank you.
Could I add something, Kathy?
Yeah, please do.
Many of you may not know, but Ames is one of the few communities in the state of Iowa that actually has an even number on the city council. The mayor cannot vote on a resolution or ordinance if there's a tie in our charter. The mayor can vote on a regular motion. So if there is a 3-3 tie, there's actually no action taken. It really didn't get defeated, it didn't pass. It just lays there. Sometimes causes some problems. But that's part of our original charter. And after that time in the state code, now any city council that's formed actually is an odd number of votes, so that the ties don't come up into play most of the time.
Other questions about our mayors? Yeah.
I have a question. I'm fairly new in the community. I've only lived here about 1.5 years. And I hope I'm not out of line, but there was a picture of somebody I'm new in the community, and at the very beginning there was a picture of a gentleman, and somebody said that they weren't going to mention his name, and then there was some chuckling, and I was wondering, there's more chuckling, and I figure anytime I hope it's not too painful or embarrassing. Yeah, that's
This is Fred Hoiberg.
A perfectly reasonable question. Who wants to answer it? How many of you want to answer it?
Fred Hoiberg is the Iowa State men's basketball coach.
Well, that much I know, but he's not been the mayor yet.
He's not a mayor of Ames, but he is known as the mayor.
Given a
Can anybody
nickname.
give any better of an explanation of
Who knows a better answer?
I don't have the right answer.
Why Fred is called the mayor?
When he was a star on the Iowa State team, we had an election, and he got 2 write-in votes for the city mayor, and that's where I heard where it started.
So he grew up in Ames, was a star on the high school basketball team, Iowa State basketball and on up, but has been known as the mayor in Ames for quite some time. Ironically enough, on Sunday, as the Iowa State men's basketball team was playing, I had the game on TV. I had my laptop on my lap, working on this very presentation. And I hear the announcer on the TV say, Ann Campbell is the mayor of the city of Ames. And I kind of perked up, and then of course they went on to talk about Fred Hoiberg being mayor. But very ironic timing.
Other questions? Thank you for being brave enough to ask that question. You know, we shouldn't assume that everybody knows the stories. Yeah.
I was wondering if Ted thinks that the mayor has enough power, or should it be? Should the power be enhanced?
I hope you can all hear me. Oh, you're going to share? Thanks, Shannon. Actually, the mayor does have some hidden powers that you may not be really aware of, but we have numerous committees, commissions in the city. It is the responsibility of the mayor, number one, to conduct all of the city council meetings with parliamentary procedure, etc. But secondly, to advertise for applicants to those boards and commissions. After reviewing those applications, submitting a list to the city council for their approval with the applications to be appointed to those boards and commissions. All of the boards and commissions within our city are voluntary. They get no pay, and they are strictly advisory. They are to advise the council on numerous issues. The only one that does get some pay is the zoning board of adjustment. And that's when you disagree with the assessment on your property. But that's a very powerful tool for a mayor, particularly if he has the support of the council, which fortunately I had. They might question one or two, and we usually had that behind the scenes, so to speak, so nobody got embarrassed in public. Not like the governor's going through with the board of regents right now, quite honestly. So there are a number of power. The only thing I would say that if it were to be expanded would be the rule of voting on that tie, because it does put city staff in a terrible position. They don't know whether to put that project on a shelf or to move ahead, bring it back again, and so it takes a lot longer time than it normally should in some of the process.
Oh, right there.
I wanted to ask about the solid waste plant. Was that under Lee Fellinger?
The solid waste plant, was that under Lee Fellinger?
Yeah, I was trying to remember when that.
It actually opened in 1974.
So under what mayor did that project?
1974 was prior to Lee, I believe.
She was mayor in 75 when I moved here.
Right. It was actually probably started just before the initial years to get it done.
I didn't bring all my cheat sheets with me. She was mayor from 76 to 79. So it was whoever was prior to her, and I apologize, I did not memorize the mayors. There's not a song about it, I didn't memorize it.
It's actually one of only 4 plants in the nation.
Yeah.
And it's actually about the only one still operating today because the others had some problems. But
I have a question. Why don't we change the rule so we have an odd number rather than, why don't we still have an even number on the city council?
That one's for you.
Well, Dale, it's because people like to talk about change, but they sure don't like to do it. It would require a public vote, a change in our city charter, either to go to one more council member, or to give the ex officio official status, or to give status to the mayor. I think that not too distant future, one of the things is that the population growth is going to require that we probably have another council member, because there are certain parameters by state code, percentage of population differential in precincts and wards, etc. Yeah. I vote for it.
Other question? Any other question? Dennis has a great little historical footnote about yet another mayor.
Well, you see one of the alternative mayors on the screen now. Do you know who the mayor of Campustown was? He had a barber shop, Fred shop. It was Fred Watney. And we have in our collection his tie-dye t-shirt that says Mayor of Campustown on the back.
Daryl, did you have a question too?
So the word maverick has some connotations to it. Who are some of the Mavericks? Why would you say that?
Think I'll snap.
I'm going to let Kathy field that question, because Kathy is the one that titled this presentation.
Put me on the spot.
I'm good.
may have to dodge this question. I don't know. But certainly a maverick is someone who kind of goes against the grain. And we had some guys that were doing some kind of against the grain things. Who did you mention tonight? Oh, who was the guy that instituted the that they could pay for City Hall?
It's in my notes, sorry.
It's in your notes somewhere, anyway.
It's in there.
But you have to admit, Daryl, it's a great title. Don't you think it's a great title? It's a great title, honestly. But you're right. We should have come up with a few examples of Mavericks. Merrill Jones oversaw a very controversial increase in commercial assessments. They needed money to construct the very first City Hall in 1886, so he was really going against the grain, asking people for money, God forbid, to build something here in our fair city.
We just wanted to tell you all the good things about the mayors. See, we only had that one fist fight happen. That there, you know, we want to keep it nice.
Other questions?
Yeah.
I'm not out of the microphone, but didn't Paul Goodwin also initiate Cyride?
Did Paul Goodwin initiate Cyride? I don't think so. I think I saw that Larry Curtis was more of an instigator of Cyride.
Whoever did it, that's important to mention.
Absolutely, that was very important to mention. I believe, as I was looking at this research just the other day, that I think it was Larry Curtis that was more instrumental in that.
It was actually proposed by a student at Iowa State.
Actually proposed by a student at Iowa State.
And then carried through by Larry. Boy, where's Bob Bourne when you really need him? Bob, where are you tonight?
I have learned so much through this, and there's so many other stories. We don't have time to listen to me talk about everything that I have learned. But not being a lifelong resident of Ames, this has been very interesting for me just to see a little bit more about the history of our city. So.
Anna, you did a great job. Would you all give her a great round of applause?